afternoon. You are at the ROAR webinar series with Dr. Lisa Coleman, and I am Josefina Bonilla, and we're talking on Mondays all things diversity, inclusion, and equity. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you so much. It's so great to see you. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. I'm beginning to really enjoy Mondays.
Me too. That's why, because of this.
Because of this.
Gives me something to look forward to.
That's right. That's right. I was running around before.
Me too.
To get everything done before we had.
I was running around too. You know, Monday mornings trying to get everything that I was supposed to do.
We have a few people on Zoom, and we have quite a few people on Facebook. And then, of course, we record these and put them on YouTube. And all we discuss for this, now, of course, had you joined us 5 minutes before, we were talking all things personal. We're talking all things diversity, inclusion, and equity. So today's topic is all about ERGs.
That's right.
And I was thinking about this before I logged in, thinking about, you know, there's companies, as we talked about last week, that are far along in the journey. Some are just starting. In the same way, there's ERGs that are driven by employees and some that are driven by companies.
Right.
Right? So sometimes you have a company that doesn't have a strategy or it doesn't have any diversity and inclusion, but they want to start ERGs. Yeah. Right? And that's what they immediately think. What is it? Flags, food, and fun.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So can we talk about the two different scenarios and,
yes.
and what companies should look for at first, and then I want to talk about sponsors.
Yes, absolutely. So you're exactly right. A lot of the ERGs, especially historically, they formed sort of what now people use organically, right? So maybe some employees came together and said, we want to form some kind of ERG. And maybe it's because they heard about it at a different company, or they came from a different company where they had ERGs, and so they want to have them. And a lot of those will be sometimes identity-based. So for people of African descent, or people of Latin descent, or for women, or LGBTQ plus groups. And then what we've seen also is the emergence of groups, particularly over the last couple years, some ERGs that are interested in things like sustainability, or ERGs that are generationally based. So maybe a millennial group, or millennials in tech, or Generation Z. And that leads me to the last group, which are then interest groups, right? Which are also via ERGs. So like I said, you know, women in tech. So not all women, but focused in some sort of areas. So those are.
Before you go on though, is there a distinction between companies that had softball groups and groups that got together because they were all interested in reading a certain book? Yeah. What's the difference with this?
Yeah. So in some companies, especially historically, they formed, like I said, sort of organically, and they would be support groups of sort kinds, right? To bring employees together to, like you said, maybe share books, maybe share play softball. And it was kind of a community building exercise, right? So that's kind of the idea. And soft launch, no real attachment to the business practices, often not really involved in the mission of the company or the organization, just really to bring employees together to usually, and the idea, although many companies' leaders didn't know this, but the idea sprung from this idea of creating critical mass. So that if you can create community and bring together people of a certain interest group, then you can create critical mass, and then over the long haul, then your community will have, better community engagement. And this goes back to that sort of soft HR idea of community engagement. But actually, as it turns out, sort of, as we've already sort of, said, I mean, we're implying, right? That's not enough. It can't be just these random groups within a company or an organization, because often then they don't have influence or impact on the organization itself in terms of thinking about change, being a change agent, et cetera. So now what we're seeing is more companies are thinking about, and then the people within the ERGs are thinking about, well, how do we use ERGs for the company? So I'm going to talk about two ways. One is, right, the ERGs having sponsors, and we can talk more about what those sponsors look like later, but having sponsors, executive sponsors, or just sponsors within the company. And those will be people who then can help the members of the ERG understand the company better. So those are often for retention and climate, right, measures. So if I'm sponsoring an ERG for women and I'm an executive sponsor, then usually what I'm doing is helping women to figure out how to navigate the company, to make sure they get promotions, to make sure that in the as that they're being tapped for different kinds of opportunities, right? Whether that's sort of growth opportunities, whether that's some kinds of unique professional development opportunities, right? So I might be sponsoring the women's group to look for those high potential individuals across my organization.
Are these sponsors usually executives?
Sometimes they're executives and sometimes they're not. I often suggest that you have two kinds of sponsors. One at the executive level, because you need the executives to often show throughout the company that this is important and brand it for the company. But then the second piece I always say, you have to deal with the messy middle, that middle part of the organization, because the top and the bottom, they always, sometimes they're in line, but that middle part of the organization often is not. So you need sponsors in the middle part of the organization. So they too are working with those executive sponsors at the highest level. So you're getting that information throughout the organization. And then the second part that you have to do is make sure that those BRGs or ERGs are somehow related to the mission of the organization. So if the mission of your organization is a banking organization and it's, we're going to provide banking to, you know, XY constituents, then you have to think about, okay, well, how are our ERGs going to help us provide that service to particular constituents? And I've been saying right now, this is a perfect time to think about how you leverage your ERGs. If you think about what's happening with people with disabilities, if you think about what's happening with women, right, having to go home and having lots of care for children and elder care, if you think what's happening with people of Latin descent who've been attacked by lots of different groups, including our federal government, right? And so how are you supporting those groups? And then, of course, people of African descent who've been experiencing, as we know, violence, etc. So all of those groups, right? What if you have your ERGs and you're actually working with those ERGs? They can help you leverage, develop programs,
Right.
help you figure out how to do recruitment, help you figure out how to retain people, and help you figure out how to transform your climate. And so that's the way to leverage those ERGs.
And how to market.
That's exactly right.
Products. That's a huge piece that I think a lot of companies are really missing the boat on.
That's right, branding and marketing, right? And so if you want to do internal branding to actually say that your company is X, Y, and Z, and that you want to attract diverse talent, then you have to think about your internal branding and marketing, and then what's your external branding and marketing. And I say this all the time, you don't want to be Blockbuster.
That's right. You say that all the time.
You got to think about who you're marketing to, right? Blockbuster never thought about marketing to lower income and the people who were different than the market they thought they were marketing to. And if they had had a good internal and external, you know, we might still see blue and green signs places, but now we see Netflix.
Was it blue and green or was it blue and yellow?
Blue and yellow, that's right. Blue and yellow, that's right. You're right. I forgot, that's right.
We're talking about ERG. So sponsors, they are equally important.
Yes, yes, sponsors are so important. And I say this a lot is that, right, when we're talking about this, so let's talk about the difference between a mentor and a sponsor, just so the people who, you know, have an idea of what that is. So a mentor is someone who usually, right, they are going to be with you. They're going to help you navigate situations. You go to them for counsel. They're going to know a lot of your flaws, your positive things. They're going to be the person that you call, right, literally, right, to help you navigate situations. And usually a mentor-mentee relationship is a long-term relationship. A sponsor relationship may be long-term, but it may be short-term. And it often is not someone who's as familiar, quite frankly, with your flaws. They're familiar with you as a high performing, usually individual. So what I say, I even use myself when I'm in my organization now, I do a lot more sponsorship than I do mentorship. Mostly because, right, mentoring takes a lot of time. And so
Right.
now what I do is for people who are high performing professionals, both within NYU and external to NYU, I can provide recommendations. I can say, you might take a look at them, or you might take a look at this company, and that's sponsorship, right? And because I'm an executive now, I'm able to do that. I can't say this enough because sponsorship is about networks. And what we know, the old adage is you don't get a job by what you know, it's about who you know.
You know.
Now, we hope that's not exactly exactly right, all true. Some of it is about what you know, and your credentials and things like that, but it is also about networking. And so to get the right networks is about getting those sponsors. And so I think within your company, so people will ask me sometimes, well, should I lead an ERG? Yeah, sure. I think leading an ERG can be a good way to get some soft leadership skills, right? And especially if your ERGs right now are organically formed and you want to make them more formal. So they're informal, they were organic, and now you want to formalize them. That's a good way to get some leadership skills to be noticed within your organization and also to network across your organization as well as externally. So I can't say enough about both being an ERG leader, but also then being a sponsor, because then if you're a sponsor, also you're going to get additional networks. So let's say I'm trying to diversify my company and I'm an executive sponsor and I'm in the C-suite. Not only am I going to get to work with that ERG, but I'm also going to get to work, like if I'm working with the Asian and Pacific Islander organization, then I'm going to get to work with Ascend, right, which is one of the largest, right, organizations. I'm going to get to work with those those Asian identified external organizations as well. And that's going to help me, right, in terms of my leadership abilities moving forward. So being a sponsor is not just helpful to the group, but to the person.
So let's take a step backwards. You have a company that doesn't have any
Yeah.
experience. They're not willing to show up in that way because maybe they have a huge brand, right? But they want to start ERGs, right? And it's let's say in this scenario, it's driven by the employee,
Yeah.
right? So what should the company do to support those employees?
Yeah. So the first thing the company should do is to provide space, and that right now that's Zoom space, right? So
Right.
Zoom space for those groups to gather, right? And then often also what they should offer is to have a sponsor, right? Maybe not at the first meeting, but to say we want to sponsor this at the highest level and at the middle of the organization. So once you have organically, right, brought yourselves together and figured out, who's going to be in the group and how you want it to, soft structure, we want to support it and have a formal structure and a formal sponsorship. So that's how companies can begin to help. I think the other ways that, and provide space, the other ways that companies can help is, and I will say this right now, a lot of the groups are going to be identity based, but a lot of them aren't. Right. A lot of them are going to be generationally based, or they're going to be people, for instance, right now, a lot of groups are being formed in companies. I've been asked to consult on this for anti-racism. Anti-racism is going to be a group that's going to be across identity, right? So maybe you have a company where people want to come together because they've seen the xenophobia and racism directed toward people of Asian descent, and you have a large group of people of Asian descent within your company. So maybe now there's a group that says, we want to deal with this, we want to tackle this, we want to take this on. And so so you have a group that's dedicated to anti-racism and anti-xenophobia. So then, right, you have to think about the sponsorship. You also have to think about the educational tools, right? So how are you going to help the group get educational tools? Is there going to be soft level funding? People always ask me about ERGs and funding.
Right, right.
Right. And I always say this is, for most ERGs, now I know the people who are leading ERGs, they're not going to be happy when I say this, but right, ERGs shouldn't be that expensive. Sometimes you're paying for some refreshments or for some gatherings. Usually you might be paying a mild honorarium to provide some books or something like that for people to read.
Speakers coming
Right,
in.
and maybe speakers, but we're not talking, $50,000, right, for this kind of thing. It's really to help develop community, and then also to help brand market your company to and for particular constituency groups. And I can't say enough, right? We know about changing demography. And so,
Right.
right. And so we know that we need to be able to market to Generation Z. We have to be able to market to people of color. We have to be able to market to LGBTQ plus populations and people with disabilities and people across religious affiliations, right? And so that's diversity.
That's right. So a company again, I find what I've been hearing a lot is that these companies, and again, I'm really kind of focused on this particular type of company that doesn't know what they're doing.
Yes.
They don't want to show up in that way, so they're hoping that this can be more organic. But one thing that you pointed out, they have to provide certain tools in order for this group to be successful.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. Because an ERG can exist within a company without support. Sure. So people will ask me, can I have an ERG if my company doesn't support it? Yes. You can have an ERG, but the effectiveness of that ERG is going to be to somewhat limited, because the reality is what you want is the ERG to be embedded within the company, right? And embedded within sort of thinking about the mission and practice. And so, and then of course the action steps. And I think therefore it's more beneficial if the ERG has sponsorship and has individuals within the company that are supporting it from multi directions, as I talked, from the top, also, and including from the middle.
So a company that is, and again, I'm focused on this particular company, a company that is starting out, and there's a whole bunch of consultants doing this all of a sudden, right? How can they find the right consultant for them?
I think finding a consultant is really hard. So let me just say that. And you're right. Everybody's emerging right now. It's like consultant season, and everybody can do it. So what I say is, if you are looking for a consultant to come in, what you need to ask yourself are 3 questions as a company. One, right? One, are you ready for the consultant? So the first question is, are you ready for the consultant? Because that's going to tell you what kind of consultant you want to hire, right? If you want to hire a consultant like me, for instance, right? I've been doing this 20 years. I'm a hardcore person. I know a lot about leadership. I know a lot about C-suites. So you're asking someone like me to come in, that's going to be a heavy lift, right? But maybe your company isn't ready for me, and that's okay. Maybe your company is ready for someone who does, right, a surface analysis, because maybe that's what you need to get jump started, right? I may be the consultant you need 2 years from now or 16 months from now, right? And so I always say different organizations are going to start at different places. So if you know that you haven't done anything at all, nothing, right? You need to do a cursory, right, survey or assessment to say, hey, we haven't done anything. What's some low-hanging fruit that we can do, right, to jumpstart, right? You don't want to start with the long-term hardcore problems, because
And the strategy.
Right, you need a strategy, and those are intractable. So you need short-term wins, medium term, and long term. And that strategic planning, the arc of that strategic planning, right? Then you can think about, and I always say, most companies are going to need more than one consultant. One consultant is not going to take you through, and if they are going to take you through a 7-year arc, it's really weird.
Employee, right?
Right, exactly. You're going to have employees change. You're going to have all kinds of things. So, right. So you have to think about that arc as, what are we doing in that first year? What's the pulse, meaning what kind of pulses are we taking to see where we are? Then where are we in year 3? Where are we in year 5? And that's how you have to think about that arc of measurement.
Talk about really successful ERGs.
Yeah. Really successful ERGs are embedded within the companies. They are turned to by the C-suite. So the C-suite people, meaning your executives, your CEO, your CFO, your CHRO, they turn to those ERGs for information, right? Your ERG leaders are often embedded within both the middle and higher levels of your organization. So your ERG leaders aren't all at the bottom of your organization, right? You'll have some ERG leaders who are at the bottom, but some who are at the top. And that's where you want that cross-pollination. Because the thing about ERGs is you actually do want people from across the whole organization involved, because that will tell you something about, right, recruitment,
Yep.
retention, promotion, right? All of those things within your organization. So successful ERGs will have sponsors, they will be embedded, the C-suite will be turning to them for information, they will be very attuned with the mission of the organization and how that ERG is helping build constituencies and market and branding relevant to the organization and building out those constituencies. So that's what a successful ERGs will look like.
I know. I love when I have seen successful. It pains me when I still see ERGs that are focused on one day, one celebration, and it's all around food. As a matter of fact, I was invited to speak at an event, and I said, well, looking at your agenda, you don't have a lot of people of color. In particular, you don't have any Latinos here. And the company said to me, oh, you're going to love it. So she calls me back and she says, you're going to love it. We have Latino food, we have Latino music. So I had to take a hard pass on that one.
Well, that's exactly right, right? It's this food flags, right? It's like food flags and fun. And the reality is, right, most people, and I say this to leaders, right, you don't have to plan a party for us. We know how to plan a party. We can plan parties in all parts of our lives. What we often are looking for within our organizations is, yes, some of it is about, of course, positivity, and we want to come to and have joy in our work, but that's not the party. We actually want the organization to understand the importance of, right, Latino and Latinx, right, consumerism, the ways in which constituents are going to understand the company, what the buying power is, all of those things. And that's really different than a party.
Right. It's funny because companies are always talking about bringing your whole self to work, right? But maybe they're not ready for that, right?
That's exactly right.
These ERGs, I feel like, I know for a lot of people of color, showing up in the way they show up regularly, right? Yes. It's not, you show up in a different way.
Yes, and that's why I said, is your company ready for the ERGs or ready for the consultant? Because sometimes what companies will do is they'll hire a consultant and then they get mad at the consultant. Why are you saying these things? You hired me to actually do an assessment. Don't get angry with me, right? And then sometimes they'll form ERGs and they're mad at the ERG leaders because the ERG leaders are saying, well, no, it doesn't feel good when this happens, or this is the history and it didn't feel good in this ways, or the company needs to take stock in these things. And then the company's mad at the ERGs. Why are you mad at the ERGs? The ERGs are telling you something about your company that maybe if you listen to, it might help you, right, grow, help you with your recruitment, help you with your retention. I say this all the time. People are so mad at Generation Z right now. And I'm like, you could be mad at them, but they're the new generation.
That's right. And I think that you're absolutely right with the consultant. You have to be ready, because don't ask me for my true opinion. When I give it to you,
Exactly.
you don't want me back.
No, that's exactly right. And so just like you interview, when people are interviewing, candidates for jobs, you have to interview consultants, and you have to, when I'm interviewed, I actually say, what is it that you're looking for? And then I tell them, this is what I will do. right? And then if they say, oh, that's not what I want, I say, okay, well, I have some recommendations for you, because I know all kinds of consultants, right? But I might not be the right consultant at this time.
Plus, I think it's interesting because we're talking about it too from a almost negative perspective, right? But the positives of having ERGs, because forget about your emotions on this, right? It's not about how you feel that someone's telling you what's not working. Let's talk about what could work, what would be fantastic to see, what the ROI on all these things can be. And
That's
that's
exactly right. The ERG is not the problem. The ERG is an asset. That is an asset. So, right,
exactly.
I've said this a lot. How you frame something is what you get. If you frame something as a problem, then you get a problem. And that's why I said, like, if you frame the new generations as a problem, what do you think they're going to be? Your problem. But if you frame them as an asset, if you frame them as a solution, you frame it as a possibility, then that's what you get: possibility, asset, right? And lots of people, I've been saying this even with the protests and people of color. People are like, the protests are the problem. No, racism is the problem.
Exactly. So
Xenophobia is the problem.
those are the issues.
Right? And then how could we use, right, even within companies, right? People are saying, right, how can we use this energy to reflect back on our company? And I think that's where the opportunity exists.
Yeah, and I think if you step in from that perspective and try to leave some of the ego behind,
exactly,
and look at it as an opportunity. And I love that word for ERGs, because you're right. For retention, for recruitment, for marketing, or for brand management, who better than the people that are employed to be the people that are talking so well about your company?
That's exactly right. And you want those people in the ERGs to feel positive about your company, because they are going to be, right, they're the future, right? That's the thing. And when we think about, company sustainability and organizational sustainability from that sort of organizational development standpoint, you have to think about employee engagement, right? And employment and employee sustainability. And far too often, right, we're just thinking, a lot of the leaders are just thinking about the top of the company. But we have to think about the entire organization and how it's working together.
We have just a few more minutes, 3 minutes to be exact. And I like to keep my.
I do.
So if somebody has a question that you want to pose really quickly, but otherwise, I think that the conversation around ERGs is that they can be incredibly powerful. There's people out there that can help you in your journey, right?
Yes, that's absolutely right. And I say, and an ERG can be focused on anything, right? Like I said, it can be focused on sustainability and climate just as much as generations, and just as much as some ethnic categorization or gender categorization. So ERGs, and I think the best of ERGs will have lots of different kinds of ERGs within an organization or a company.
What has been the most ERGs that you have seen in one company?
I've actually seen, I've seen, well, in a very large company, I saw something like, I think there were like 35 ERGs.
So I know of a company, 67 ERGs.
Oh my goodness.
I won't say the name.
I won't say the name either, and I will say the company that I know, the ERG is working very well. They even had a luncheon ERG.
I like that. I like that. Lisa, as always, great talking with you. We have a couple minutes. Why am I rushing us off?
Because usually we're running up right to the last minute.
Exactly. Well, I think the discussion of ERGs is so potent. There's so much information, and how they can benefit the company and positioning it like that.
Yeah, and I think that ERGs can be useful across all types of companies too, right? Governmental organizations, educational organizations, right? Corporate entities. And I think that the toolkits, and I want to go back to this other piece, because the other piece that I think ERGs right now can be really helpful with is education, right? Educating the company about where they are, what's happening within these particular groups, because so many companies are wondering, like, what are our millennials thinking? What are our Generation X
And
people
you
thinking?
have them.
Right, right. And to really utilize those groups to figure that out, because that'll help you figure out the shape and form of where you want to head.
Plus, I think with, of course, we're at 1:30, so I'm going to leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. This is Dr. Lisa Coleman and Josefina Bonilla with the Aurora Webinar Summit.
Oh, wait, can I answer the one question that came in?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Yes. So, Gail, yes. Have you found any companies that develop leadership programming for their ERG leaders? Yes. And leadership, I cannot say this enough. That's why I originally said for ERG leaders, it can be really helpful to get into those positions, because then you can help to develop leadership programming for your organization to help leaders take them through things like the 6 C's of inclusive leadership or other things, but also help for programming to develop leaders across the company. And the best ways for leaders to engage with the ERGs is, right, to develop some kind of leadership council. So you're bringing together those leaders across the ERGs, but also with the sponsors and the leaders across the organization.
That's it. Well, thank you so much. We'll see you next Monday.
See you next Monday. Great to see you.